Welcome to Best Life 30, your 30-day journey to creating the best life possible for yourself. You can just watch this video, or if you want to sign up for the entire series for free and get the companion bonus worksheets that go with this video, check the link in the description below. All right, so today is day 19, and we're going to learn how to develop a habit of reading.
I like to read more than most kids. I really like to read a lot. My Aunt Edie gave me a copy of the World Almanac, and that was heaven to me. And I can still tell you that the almost population was 214,006 in 1930. Some numbers just kind of stick with you. And very early, probably when I was 7 or so, I took this book out of the Benson Library called 1,000 Ways to Make $1,000. And one of the ways in this book was having penny weighing machines. And I sat and calculated how much it would cost to buy the first weighing machine and then how long it would take for the profit for that one to buy another one. And I would sit there and create these compound interest tables to figure out how long it would take me to have a weighing machine for every person in the world. The first books I read on investment were actually in my dad's office. Pretty soon I read all the books in the office and read some of them more than once. A few years ago, I went to Amazon, and sure enough, they had this manual there. So while reliving my youth, other guys were going to Amazon probably and buying old Playboys or something, but I bought old Moody's manuals instead. And when I got out of school, I started selling stocks. I was 20 years old at the time and looked about 16 and acted about 12. So I was not the most impressive salesperson anybody ever met. But what I would do was I went through page by page looking for possibly undervalued stocks. I should mention one thing about reading. It was at the library here at Columbia that I wish I spent probably more time than any other student. I lived there practically. But I pulled the book out there, happened to be Who's Who in America, and it told me something about my professor, Benjamin Graham. And then I looked up and I went to the library and I said, I want to learn more about this because I learned this over here. Mm-hmm. That changed my whole life. We own Geico now because of that librarian directing me to some other book and then following through on that. Mm-hmm. It's the chance. I read about 1/5 the pace that Bill does, but I still spend 5 or 6 hours a day reading. I mean, you can learn so much. I particularly love biography. Just to be able to live the lives of these people that have been so extraordinary, the lessons and the discouragements they face, just everything about it. So you can't get enough of reading.
And I would say reading is the strongest signal for success in the future that I've ever seen. It is the strongest. I got my first job in radio when I was 16 years old, because I've been broadcasting since I was 16 years old. But my first job I got because I was a great reader. When you are a great reader, you can articulate and speak and command the English language in ways that other people cannot. And people think you're a lot smarter than you are, lots of times, because you're a great reader. Have you ever met a person who was a great reader when they were young who was not successful? You never. It is the absolute best foundation ever in life.
How do you read one book a week? Leaders are readers. The challenge is the average person reads about 2 books a year, but the average CEO reads about 4 to 6 books a month. So how do you get to this point where you're getting to 1 book a week? One of the reasons why I'm so excited about reading is because if somebody has decades of experience and they put it into a book, and you can sit down in a day or two and read that book, you could download decades of knowledge in days, right? So you have such a huge advantage. So how do you read 1 book a week without speed reading? Well, here's the secret. Look at the numbers, right? When I went onto Amazon, I found out that the medium number of words per book is about 64,000 words. And the average person, like we teach speed reading all around the world in 150 different countries online, the average person reads about 200 words per minute. So now when you divide 64,000 words per book by 200 words a minute, it comes out to be about 320 minutes. 320 minutes to get through a book of 64,000 words. But how many words is that a day? Divide by 7, you get about 45 minutes a day. 45 minutes of reading a day, and you get through 1 book a week. Now that's much more manageable, but here's the secret, is you have to schedule it. You must schedule this time, because if you say, oh, I'm going to read here or there, it never really happens because it's more of a dream or it's an interest. But when you schedule it, it's in your appointment book, it's in your calendar. This is time for you. It's like time you would have with your boss or an investor or somebody, a family member, something that's so important that you would never cancel on that.
I certainly was I was very, very bookish. I was reading all the time. So I was either reading, working on my computer, reading comics, playing Dungeons & Dragons, that kind of thing.
And I understand Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, that wonderful book by Douglas Adams. That was a key book for you. What was it about that book that fired your imagination?
So I guess when I was in around 12 or 13, I had kind of an existential crisis, and I was reading various books on trying to figure out the meaning of life and, well, like, what does it all mean? Because it starts seeming quite meaningless. And then we happen to have like some books by Nietzsche and Schopenhauer in the house, which you should not read at age 14. It's bad. It's really negative. But then I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was like quite positive, I think, and it sort of highlighted an important point, which is that a lot of times the question is harder than the answer, and if you can properly phrase the question, then the answer is the easy part. And so, if to the degree that we can better understand the universe, then we better know what questions to ask, and then whatever the question is that most approximates what's the meaning of life, that's the question we could ultimately get closer to understanding. And so I thought, well, to the degree that we can expand the scope and scale of consciousness and knowledge, human knowledge, then that would be a good thing. I like biographies in general. Biographies, I think, are really always, really interesting read.
What'd you learn from them?
Well, I think you learn a lot, depending upon whose life you're reading about. There are lots of lessons in there. I read Isaacson's biography of Jobs, which I thought was quite interesting. And I actually really liked his biography of Benjamin Franklin, who I would say is certainly one of my heroes. He seemed like a really great guy. Basically, I sort of was thinking about this when I was a kid, and trying to find some meaning in life. Like, what's the meaning of life, I got quite sort of sad about it, actually, when I was a teenager. And then I read the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which basically said, like, basically the universe is the answer, and you just need to figure out the questions. So I think, that's if I can help kind of figure out the questions, then I consider that to be meaningful.
The fact that people argue with me on this reading thing, and people argue with me about mentors. No, just use your own gut feeling. Is that how you learn English? When you were 2 years old, you use your gut feeling to start conjugating verbs? No, you learn from other people. You learn manners, you learn language, you learn all things valuable. You learn to drive from another person. So doesn't it make sense you learn life? So books are just the mentors who maybe are dead now. You want to learn about Steve Jobs? He ain't alive to teach you. But you can learn through accumulated wisdom. And that's why, just trust me, very few powerful businessmen I've ever met don't read a lot. Warren Buffett, who I think is the best businessman by far in the world, he has 75 companies that he pretty much runs, 200 billion in revenue. He reads 8 hours a day. He reads 600. He said he slowed down in his old age. He only reads 500 pages a day. Bill Gates goes on reading vacations. Mark Zuckerberg just started a reading once a week book club on Facebook. It already got a couple million followers. And now with audio books, there's no excuse. You got YouTube videos. Let this thing run in the background. Like, you want to become like a supercomputer where you just download smart crap from smart people. And you pick and choose. Like, some people are like, Ty, I don't agree with everything you say. I'm like, good, I don't agree with everything I say. Like, a year later, I'm like, wait, I was wrong.
There is incredible and indelible influence and imprinting going on your philosophy and on your mind when you read a book. So you have a conversation with someone, and I'm sure you've had a conversation, maybe it's with a chef or a great entrepreneur or a wise human being, and that maybe it was just one conversation. But that person in that 10-minute conversation or hour-long conversation said something to you that formed your philosophy that changed the rest of your life. Well, that's what you can get in a book. You can have a conversation tonight with Kanye. You can have a conversation the next night with Edison. You can have a conversation 2 nights from now with Nelson Mandela. You can read the biography that I recently read of Elon Musk. You can read about Steve Jobs. You can read about Vincent van Gogh's life. You can read about Martin Luther King Jr.'s life. You can read about the titans of industry and what they went through and how they innovated and how they dealt with struggles and how they dealt with wealth. You can read books on productivity from the most productive people on the planet. You can learn how people who built companies like IKEA and Red Bull, how they did it. They took a small idea and built it into an empire. So what I'm suggesting to you, with great love and respect, as I always do in these mastery sessions, is reading a book is nothing more than having a conversation with the author. And you can spend your evenings or mornings or afternoons or lunchtimes connecting with the greatest minds who have ever graced the planet. You cannot put a price tag on that.
Read, write, read. If the president were here, one of his greatest strengths is reading. That's one of the reasons why he's a good communicator, why he's such a good writer. He's a voracious reader. So we're trying to get our girls, no matter what, to love reading and to challenge themselves with what they read, not just read the gossip books, but to push themselves beyond and do things that maybe they wouldn't do. So I would encourage you all to read. Just keep reading. And writing is another skill. It's practice. The more you write, the better you get. Drafts. Our kids are learning. The first draft means nothing. You're going to do 7, 10 drafts. That's writing. It's not failure. It's not the teacher not liking you because it's all marked up in red. When you get to be a good writer, you mark your own stuff in red, and you rewrite, and you rewrite, and you rewrite. That's what writing is. And if you come out with those skills, and then you're confident, and you can articulate, and you can stand up straight and look anybody in the eye and say, this is who I am, it's a pleasure to meet you. That's one of the things we try to do with our mentoring program with young girls. My message to them is if you can walk into the White House and meet the First Lady and say, my name is, how are you, and look me in the eye, then there's nothing you can't do. That's why it's important. If you guys walked here, are sitting here in front of all these people, standing tall, asking questions, using your voice, you have to practice that. These arenas just show up again and again, and then you just get used to it. The nerves go away, and you start relaxing into your own abilities. But it's practice.
You know, I could always get as many books as I wanted. I could go to the library. I had a grandmother who would read to us, and it was thought to be a great thing. So early reading lets you imagine all these situations and start to think of yourself, could I ever run a business? Could I ever discover something in science? And I do think some positive reinforcement of, hey, you're clever, you can do these things at a young age takes you a long ways. And, then, this is a great time to be a curious person.
I read very eclectically, like no book is barred from entering the book list, but then I tend to be extremely impatient about the books I actually read. I would begin like 10 books and drop 9 of them after 10 pages. It's not always the wisest policy, but it's my policy that if a book didn't really teach me something new, had some interesting insight in the first 10 pages, the chances it could be that on page 100 there'll be some mind-blowing idea that I'm now missing. But there are so many, I keep thinking there are so many books wonderful books out there that I will never read So why waste time on a less optimal book? So I would try like a book on biology and then economics and then psychology and then fiction and whatever, and just go through them quite quickly until I find something that really grabs me.
One of my favorite thoughts from Martin Luther King is, if you want a new idea, read an old book.
What old books?
Many different ones. The Bhagavad Gita is probably one of my favorite books. It's been such a huge part of my personal journey and personal life. Many other religious texts as well. So the Bible's been a big part of my study. Spent a lot of time with the Bible. And then it can just be thoughts and ideas, even of the last 2,000 years. So Stoicism, a huge fan of Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. That's been a huge book for me that I've studied. And sometimes old can just mean 50 years or 100 years ago too. But those are some of the bigger ideas that I think have had more prominent effects in my life. So Vedic and Stoic knowledge has probably been the most influential.
We gather information from other people's life experiences in a very unique way. And it's one of the reasons why people really enjoy autobiographies. It's one of the reasons why people really enjoy truly reflective, introspective thinking, because we can pick out little gems in ourselves. So even though you might be talking in your meditation book about things that other people have talked about in meditation books, you're talking about it from your unique personal experience.
Right.
And when someone reads that or hears you say it, you get something intangible out of that.
Language, I think, is a big thing that I didn't really come to until later in life. I think post-military, didn't read a lot. There was like a reading, it wasn't really encouraged, or not initially encouraged. Like all these books that my wife had read when she was a kid, I just had no idea what they were. The books you were supposed to read in high school, like I never read. And language just really wasn't how people communicated in my family. I mean, not to say anything bad about my family, it wasn't a very verbal household, and I could see a lot in them and in people when I was in the military. The absence of language really made people do crazy things, and not being able to express yourself made, I think can make people, angry, aggressive, and I just saw many examples of that. So when I went to school and for really the first time discovered plays, really, because I knew about acting and plays, but I didn't read anything until I went to Juilliard, where you're kind of like inundated with all these great writers. Then I noticed in myself that for the first time I was really to label the things that were not right or were right, or I wish I had the words for at the time. And you're in New York, you're surrounded by all these like really interested and interesting people who are, on the whole, to generalize, very, have an edge, and are around more culture. So their language is something that's more like a tool and a weapon. And I wanted that, and be able to explain a lot of things. I just can see what a valuable thing it is. And so since then, I've, really in love with language and, trying to consume it as much as I can.
I know there are ways that are recommended to read a book so as to extract the actionable information as quickly as possible from it. I have never been an adopter of any of those ways. So I basically read everything at the same speed. So I read everything like it's scripture. So if it's, People magazine in the waiting room of a dentist's office, I'm reading that at the same speed that I'm reading, a work of philosophy or neuroscience. And the big change of late, I guess this has probably happened somewhere around 10 years ago, is that once I realized that there's functionally an infinite amount of information to consume. It's doubling in the sciences every 3 to 5 years, and there are literally thousands of good books that I will wish I had read, but I will never get around to reading. I've become a very fickle reader in the sense that I cut my losses very early. The sunk cost fallacy has completely disappeared from me. The idea that I've spent 5 hours or 5 days on this thing, so I better just finish it, right? That used to be my orientation with respect to reading books. Now I'll discard a book, just on a whim, because I know there's an infinite amount of stuff I want to read. I don't go into the table of contents and look at the structure of the book and then go to the index and then look at the topics and then, I mean, I just start on page 1 and start reading, and then when I get bored, I stop, you know, and so that's, you know, do with that life hack what you will.
I'll give you a funny story here. My teacher in Glendale High School, if you're listening and you're from Glendale and you went to Glendale High School, you need to go and ask if anybody there knew a teacher named Mrs. Collins. Okay, Miss Collins. My gosh, this woman gave me nightmares. We used to read 2 books. That was Then, This Is Now, and the other one was Of Mice of Men. I don't know if you guys read it as well when you were in high school. Of Mice of Men was the Lenny, you know, he would pet the rabbit and it would kill him because he was so strong. And so I took this class, and there was a girl sitting in front of me. Her name was Carmen. She was one of the cheerleaders. And I would try to hide in front of this girl so Miss Collins wouldn't see me. And she would say, Patrick, read the next paragraph. Oh my gosh. It was like the most embarrassing. And think about it this way. The entire day when I'd go to school, I had one dread. You know what it was? 6th period, Miss Collins is going to ask me to read in front of my 30 peers, right? So I hated reading. I couldn't stand it. I was a bad speller the whole 9. So I go in the Army. For me, it was a math class. When I was in the military, I'd get bored. I'd go buy a math analysis book and I'd do formulas, because math to me was very interesting, because you're figuring life out. You're figuring out a formula, and everything in life is math. If you look around everything in this room, this is purely a mathematical setup room, right? And so all of a sudden I get out of the Army. My sister recommends me a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And my first boss from Bally's recommends me How to Master the Art of Selling by Tom Hopkins. And then I read those 2.